So hello and welcome to today's video, which is a bit of a spiritual successor to my character critique series, which is something I know I need to make more episodes of soon. Anyway, today I'm going to be going over the most underused and underdeveloped faction in Buddy, the Townies. Now in this video I'm going to talk about the clique and each member as a whole, as everybody in the faction is underused I feel. Now before I begin the video, I just want to say that if my voice is a bit lispy, it's because I've recently had surgery and this is just a side effect. So I hope it's not too noticeable. Anyway, let's get straight onto the video. So let's begin with why I think the Townies are the most underdeveloped group in the entire game. Well, for a start off, there's actually a few major plot holes in Buddy about them, with the biggest one being in the busting in missions, where Jimmy somehow knows who Edgar is and where the Townies hideout is located, despite the fact that in the entirety of chapter 5 we never meet or even hear of anybody called Edgar existing at all, nor are we actually shown where the hideout is. There's also a lot of cut content which actually hints that the entire Townie storyline was changed incredibly late into development, with loads of leftover files which do explain a lot of these plot holes. Now while every chapter in Buddy is dedicated to a specific group, we do at least get familiar with most of the faction leaders early on, except Edgar of course, with Russell, Ernest and Johnny Vincent playing semi-big roles throughout the story, and Darby Harrington taking a more minor role. Now I'm not going to cover Ted Thompson again because I did that video last year, but to give credit where it's due, Edgar has actually handled much better in the story than Ted ever was, but I'll get more into that later. But even then, Edgar is introduced in the second to last mission in the entire game. Now another bit of a weird plot hole of sorts is in the mission Balls of Snow, where Rudy says he's been abused by those kids, you know, the Townies. But the thing with this is, they never actually spawn in New Coventry during the day, yet during this mission they do, which is a bit strange. They only spawn in New Coventry at night, and okay, granted this might have been at night time when the Townies abused Rudy, but the mission only takes place before 11 PM and the Townies do not spawn until after then. Now on the subject of that, there seems to be a lot of massive oversight with the Townies in New Coventry. For example, in the mission The Collector, the entire cutscene takes place in New Coventry, hinting that maybe the Townies themselves occupied New Coventry before it was given to the Greasers. Now apparently this was fixed on the Wii version of the game, but I think like 96% of people who play Buddy don't play it on the Wii. Not only that, but the Townies hideout is unlocked in the second to last mission in the entire game, and while it is accessible whenever you want afterwards, it's just very empty. Nobody ever spawns here. There's no Townies, no law enforcement, there's no adults, there's no workers, nothing like that. The entire area is nothing more than a barren wasteland with absolutely no use to it whatsoever. There's no collectibles either. It's almost like as if Rockstar didn't have the time to code in any factory workers or Townies to patrol the area. And it's actually a bit of a shame too, because the hideout is incredibly well made, with the area being, well, massive, and even have anarchist symbols all around the place, which actually give us a fantastic insight into the Townies' views, implying that maybe like in the beta or something like that, the Townies were going to be here, because they clearly have spent a lot of time in this, well, abandoned power plant place. Now one of the best things about Buddy's cliques is how every clique is formed of a group of friends with the same interests, like how the nerds like science, comics and all that, and the Greasers have a deep love for 1950s America. But rather interestingly, every individual member of the Townies are there for different reasons, as opposed to just being, well, dropouts or a group of friends with similar interests. The only thing that all the Townies do have in common is they hate school kids, well, Bullworth Academy to be very specific, but everybody has their own reasons to hate them. For example, Edgar Munson and Zoe Taylor do have their reasons to hate Bullworth Academy stated in the game, with Zoe saying she got expelled after complaining about Mr. Burton being creepy, and Edgar Munson is jealous because his family couldn't afford to pay for his education, so he stuck at Bullworth for a year, which is actually a bit interesting and hints that maybe Edgar is like Jimmy in a way, that he is also not a resident of Bullworth. Now Edgar himself is an incredibly cut down character to what he was supposed to be, and because of that his character is actually a bit of a letdown. Now as mentioned at the beginning of the video, there's an awful lot of cut content surrounding the Townies, and even more surrounding Edgar. As mentioned earlier with the plot holes and that, there's also a completely deleted cutscene before his boss fight, but even in his boss fight, he was going to be an incredibly dangerous psychopath, even going as far as killing Jimmy by throwing him into acid. Now without turning this into a beta video too much, I do need to give context to those who are unaware. Edgar had a much more dangerous and psychotic personality to him, and the only remains of this are the acid ending, which actually have him laughing at Jimmy as Jimmy slowly burns to death. Alongside some of the other stuff like the plot holes I mentioned, with Jimmy somehow knowing him in the original busting in cutscene, despite Edgar not existing at all, implying that Jimmy was going to meet Edgar much earlier on in the story. Because there's so much cut content surrounding Edgar, he was just a bit of a disappointing character in my opinion. Edgar was definitely handled much better than Ted Thompson ever was, somehow. I mean, even though Edgar does appear in the second to last mission of the game, he somehow has more on-screen time than Ted does. Like for one, Edgar has an actual reason to go after Jimmy and the Academy because of Gary's manipulation, and Edgar happily helps Jimmy get revenge as opposed to Ted, who just, well, appears in a story that goes absolutely nowhere and has a rather weird end to his boss fight and doesn't even appear at all in his own chapter aside from the intro and the ending. Actually wait, I was actually a bit wrong. Edgar does actually appear much earlier on in the game, in Balls of Snow, as a generic NPC with no special roles or anything. He just walks up and down, up and down, up and down, he doesn't do anything. So yeah, quite a disappointing use for such a powerful character if you ask me. Now, I'm definitely not saying that Edgar was handled, like the best character in the game. He's actually one of the worst handled characters in the game aside from Ted in my opinion. But from Edgar's introduction to the very end, he is handled as well as he could have been. Now, one of the details I did like about this was how after beating Edgar, he says he stuck at Borth because his parents couldn't afford to send him there. Which I actually do find interesting because Edgar is the leader of the Dropouts, even if he isn't a native Borth resident. And I'm definitely looking far too deep into this, but maybe this means the Townies are a rather new faction around Bulworth, as there's no way an out-of-towner could become leader of a group that's been around for years. Maybe this means that many of the Townies aren't actually like residents of Bulworth either. Arguably the most important Townie in the entire game is Zoe Taylor, and in my opinion Zoe is a bit of a strange character, as she was one of the earliest created characters going all the way back to the 2005 Tyler Wilson concept art works. Yet, like Edgar, she gets a very, very small amount of on-screen time, as she first appears halfway through chapter 5 and then not again until the second to last mission, busting in. Though, unlike Edgar, Zoe does get a fair amount of on-screen time, alongside being added to free mode after the story is done anyway. And I do apologise for getting off topic here, but I really don't know why Rockstar could do that for Zoe, but yet not do it for like Pete, Johnny, Darby, Ernest, Edgar and Ted, etc. She's also the only non-clique leader to never actually spawn in free mode. Well, as a Townie anyway. Because she does have a lot of unused files where she's hostile towards Jimmy, implying that maybe she was going to appear anyway. Because of this, I feel that Zoe's character in the story was really underdeveloped. Like, all we know about her in the story is she's expelled because Mr. Burton was a creep and she and Jimmy just hit it off quite well. That's about it. But in free mode, she, like most other buddy characters, are well written, with a nice bit of backstory, such as a home life with a mum, who she argues a lot with. She has a somewhat tomboyish personality, with her getting into fights frequently, alongside loving to vandalise stuff. Well, that's if Rockstar didn't code every single girl as refusing to fight, and yeah, you get the idea on that, but we'll overlook that and just focus on the character. Now overall, if Zoe wasn't added to free mode at the end of the game, I feel she would have been a wasted character like Edgar and Ted were, but the addition to add her was actually a great one to me. Now to me, Duncan the Townie has a somewhat depressing backstory and is probably one of the more fleshed out Townies rather than Zoe and Edgar, because if you hang around Duncan in free mode, you can find a bit of possible lore between him and Davis, as Davis can often be heard gloating about how he once bullied the kid so hard he dropped out of school entirely, and Duncan can actually be overheard saying he dropped out because of bullying, possibly hinting that maybe there's a bit of history between him and Davis. Now going off Duncan's quotes, if he never left Bulworth, he seems to be a bit more of a greaser kind of character, as he mentions his hatred for the preppies, alongside some quotes mentioning bike stuff like wanting to jump City Hall. Now even though he says he's not good on bikes, he also made a bong in shop class, so he's definitely good with mechanical works. Though at the same time, he does seem to be a bit of a nerd, as he does seem to like fantasy based games like Grottos and Gremlins, and he also wants to look like a barbarian. And this, combined with his bong making, could imply that he was a fantastic smart student who got bullied a lot before he dropped out and took an interest in extreme sports. Despite the fact that Gurney has a very, very short story appearance, we actually learn that he is probably the most dangerous person in the Dropouts and arguably the entire game, as his only story role involves him setting fires, with the arson attack on the gym, and the other was when he was with the other Townies setting the preppies' boxing trophies on fire. I feel something as serious as attempted murder in a light-hearted game like Buddy really makes Gurney stick out, and in some ways I'm kinda disappointed that this isn't touched upon more. This single action of Gurney setting the gym on fire makes him and the Townies fantastic dangerous antagonists, and add a lot of seriousness to an otherwise not so serious game. But on the other hand, I feel that attempted murder is a bit too on the nose with how dark Gurney's attack really was. For what it's worth, Buddy does dark humour and tones rather subtle, with the asylum itself being a great example. But as said, I feel attempted murder is a bit too much on the nose. Now this, coupled with Edgar and possibly being a dangerous psychopath, makes me wonder just how insane and dangerous the entire group was going to be. In between throwing somebody into acid and committing arson, it really makes you think. But on the subject of that, Gurney in free mode is just not dangerous at all. In fact, in free mode he's just a womanizer and a lot of his quotes are just about girls, which to me is a bit of a stark difference between the pyromaniac we see him being in chapter 5. It just seems a bit of a shame to me, as Gurney had a lot of potential to be a really threatening character, and it's just sort of like forgotten about in free mode. I don't know what others think of Jerry, but to me at least, Jerry is the most common townie because I swear I've seen more than anybody else. Despite this, Jerry has arguably the least amount of on-screen time in the entire game, well, story-wise that is, as he doesn't have any actual speaking lines in the story itself, but only speaks once in the side mission Townies Challenge. But like most Clique members, Jerry's redeeming qualities definitely come from his personality, as he seems to be a bit of a narcissist, as he seems to think himself of being a bit more intelligent than anybody else. One depressing fact about Jerry is he has abandonment issues, as his father left him when he was younger, and this only really comes to light when he's intimidated. It is a bit of a strange thing to put in, but I guess it gives Jerry a backstory and explains why he hides behind a tough guy's facade. There's not much I can really say about him because Jerry just doesn't really have much to do in the story at all, and his personality is quite generic in my opinion. And I apologise for my phone going off then. So let's talk about the second in command of the Townies, Omar. Now Omar does have a bit of a dark personality like Gurney, as he hates Wolf Academy that much he actively wishes for somebody to burn it down and kill the people inside. Yeah, he actually wishes for that. Sorry to keep revisiting that topic, but all this dark stuff is the only insight we get into how Buddy was originally planned to be. You know, wishing for people to be killed, that's definitely a personality that stands out more when compared to the rest of Buddy's cast than that. On the subject of that, Omar is a bit more of a typical criminal, as he goes around mugging people, which is also a stark contrast to the usual just bullying for lunch money we see around the rest of the game. To me, Omar is definitely one of the few characters that feels like he's from the Buddy beta era, with how criminal he really is. None of his characters really dumbed down or changed for the final release. Then again, it does fit perfectly into the dropout stereotype, as dropouts are often stereotyped as being either lazy, like Leon, or a criminal, like Omar. I always find it weird how Omar is stated to be Edgar's right hand man in busting in, because unlike other characters like Damon West or Pino Romano, this is never mentioned during free mode, nor does Omar even appear next to Edgar in complete mayhem. To me it just feels like Rockstar needed somebody to hold the keys to the plant or something, and they just gave Omar a bit of time in the light, because, you know, Gurney had his role burning the gym, and Duncan and Leon had a role sabotaging the deliveries and that. Now, despite being an incredibly minor character, Leon does actually have a somewhat stereotypical dropout personality, as a lot of his quotes about how he just wants to sit on his ass and watch TV all day, never get a job and that, possibly implying he dropped out of Wolf Academy because he just couldn't be bothered with the work anymore, which is actually a bit more of a realistic characteristic for the Townies, as during my school and college years, I definitely remember a few people who just wanted to do absolutely nothing after they left, and I'm sure we all know somebody like that as well. Now, one of the best things about Leon in my opinion is there's actually a really small detail with his backstory, and that is he hates Mrs. Carvin, the librarian. And this could actually be the reason why he's stuffing the rats into the crates for the library, which is an absolutely amazing detail to have. Like, Leon is an incredibly minor character, yet he has hatred for another character, which is only mentioned outside of missions, but his only story appearance is him purposely antagonising the character that he hates. Like, Rockstar didn't have to do that, but I'm glad they did. It really keeps things consistent with Leon's character. Now, if I had to use any townie to be a poster boy for "this clique was rushed," aside from Edgar, Henry, or Clint, whatever his name is supposed to be, would be it. Because Rockstar couldn't even get his name right themselves. Like in free mode he's called Henry, but in the missions where Jimmy meets him he's called Clint. It's why in the Buddy community he's often referred to as Clint, aka Henry. On top of that, the two missions where Jimmy meets Clint, or Henry or whatever his name is today, are also quite off because Jimmy doesn't even know this guy, yet somehow they know each other already. At least with like the other side missions, it actually gives us a reason how Jimmy knows these people, yet for some reason it just feels like there's something missing where Jimmy and Clint meet. But aside from that though, Henry's main characteristic is he's quite insane. Think a bit of a softer version of Trevor Phillips from GTA 5 and how he acts and how quick he resorts to violence and how mentally unstable he is, and actually, you know what, I've just noticed another similarity between Henry and Trevor. They both have a fear of clowns. So who knows, maybe a bit of Clint's personality was inspired for Trevor. Who knows? That aside, it's the really small details like this that makes me appreciate the characters of Buddy a whole lot more. Like, we don't get this stuff with GTA or Red Dead NPCs, but in Buddy, Rockstar are just like, yeah, this guy's scared of clowns. Even though it's never really touched upon, it's not relevant to the story at all, it doesn't change anything, but it's just a nice little thing to give everybody their own unique personality. Now, as for Clint's reason in being a townie, he was kicked out of Ball for running an illegal casino on school grounds, which to me is hilarious. I know I'm going to come off as negative again, but I also think that it's weird how like Henry's also an asylum patient too, as he does appear in both asylum missions, and even an errand as an inmate, yet he's never seen in that place again. which is probably due to cut content around the asylum itself. Otto and Leon are the only other two Townies who do appear as asylum patients anyway, despite also being free people too, if that makes any sense. Otto, in my opinion, is one of the lesser fleshed out characters, as nothing's really known about him compared to any others. All we really know about him is he hates school and he hates the greasers most. Like Henry, he also has asylum appearances, which is never really touched upon, sadly. I don't really have much to talk about Otto because he's just there. He's probably the least developed dropout of them all. Now, Otto is also a bit of a strange case because he's the only character in the game to drop an F-bomb, but even then that's only on the PS2 version. As every other version, where the line he says, well, I can't really say it, but just add the word "and my life" to the end of it, was completely cut from the game. So while he does lack a lot of personality, he does keep a lot of Buddy's original more adult theme. I can't help but wonder if maybe some of the other dropouts had similar lines, or if this is why Otto might lack a lot of personality, because a lot of his original quotes contained a lot of swearing and were cut. That's just a thought. So that's it for today's video. I really do hope you appreciated my thoughts on the dropouts, and if you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe for more Buddy based content and that. I hope to see you all at the next video. So thank you for watching and have a great day.